Everyone, welcome to meeting 53, May 24th, post KubeCon CNCF Con. Welcome to the Tinkerbell contributors meeting. This meeting's being recorded. We've put a notification in Slack for the link to the Zoom channel. I don't see any new faces. Glad to see folks that are here. Anybody watching in the future, watching this recording, we do have a code of conduct, and I will post the agenda link in the chat. So please check out the code of conduct if you haven't already. All right, let's jump right into it. Show and tell. Go for it, Micah.
Yeah, I just thought this is just a cool thing I just wanted to share because to me, this is exciting about Tinkerbell. So CNCF has dev stats on all of its projects, and developers can update their affiliations about which company that they're associated with and contributing for. And so the data had been a little bit off recently, just people hadn't had their affiliations updated, and then it takes 2 to 4 weeks for those affiliations to get back into dev stats, and it updated pretty recently. And I can share this window. Let's see. All right, so that's it first. Here, this is just a cool stat, I thought. Obviously Equinix has been the original producer and maintainer of Tinkerbell. And obviously there's several of us from Amazon here now, and we've been contributing a lot, but I think, so folks know that, but I think it's cool to see that the numbers start to show it. So if you look at the 7-day moving average of all contributions, we've contributed a lot in the last about quarter or so. And so as a sum total, it's risen quite a bit, and then also as a percentage, it's risen quite a bit. I think to me, this is a success story. I think for Tinkerbell that it's not just a one company project anymore, and then also that it's grown beyond what it originally was. So I think to me, this is just cool to see the stats start to come up in this way, and I think this is something that I know we all want to see even more folks contribute to outside of Equinix and Amazon. And so I also think that will start to happen in the next few months and certainly years to come. So I just thought this was cool and wanted to share it with everyone.
Nice. We're growing. That's exciting. Definitely. Thanks, Micah. Any other show and tell items didn't make it to the list?
Not really show and tell, but I'm curious for those who went to KubeCon, if there was any Tinkerbell related conversations that you could share here, or meets or anything. I wasn't there, so I might just be shooting in the dark here.
Yeah, I was there. There was a lot of, I had a lot of conversations around Tinkerbell. Personally was able to meet a bunch of people in person. That was awesome. Dan Finneran, Jeremy Tanner. I saw Aaron there, which was cool. Jason DeTibris. I actually got to see Pooja and Chris for the first time in person too, which was really cool. So there was a small Tinkerbell meetup, I guess, so to speak. Who was there? It was Dan, myself, Chris, Jeremy, Jason. I forget his name. There was a gentleman from VMware.
And it begins with N. I
And
forget what it was.
Shoot.
And then somebody from CNCF infrastructure.
Yeah, I think his name was Caleb something. Yeah, so that was really cool. We talked about the project in general. We talked a lot about Hook actually. Yeah, I took a bunch of notes. I'm still compiling. Where did I put that thing here? I'm still compiling those. But yeah, there was some stuff to bring up in here about some of that. But yeah, yeah. Anybody else? Chris, Pooja, Aaron?
I wanted to just throw out, it's more of a tell, there's no showing. I raised the PRs to drop all the 32-bit builds. So some of them haven't merged yet, but that was based on the Slack chat that we all had. So yeah, that's going through.
On the subject of KubeCon, just to make everyone aware, the KubeCon CNCF NA is in November in Detroit, and the CFP closes Friday.
No, they pushed it back a week.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Next week.
That was smart.
Yeah.
Let everyone recover from KubeCon.
Let everyone recover from COVID first before they
Yeah,
have to put their,
exactly.
Yeah.
their FPM. I was going to say Jeremy probably had more to say about Tinkerbell and KubeCon than I did, but he's got COVID, so he's not going to be here.
Yeah.
It just pinged me actually,
go ahead.
telling me as much. I think he was scared because I hugged him.
Yeah, hopefully that doesn't get around too much, but yeah. One interesting note, Mike, you brought up CFPs. I think just a good goal in general for the project and something we talked about as a group, that small group that met up, was progressing in the CNCF. And there's some really cool advantages to becoming. So right now, obviously we're a sandbox, but if you move to incubating, Jason DeTibris was telling me that guarantees us as a project some interesting and cool things like booths and talks and maintainers times, et cetera, during the KubeCon CNCF conference, which is really cool. So I don't know how, I know obviously we've been focusing a lot on like the code and things of that nature, but it's something to keep in the back of our mind. If we can push ourselves forward into incubating, we could get some guaranteed publicity or, spots and stuff in some of the upcoming conferences, which would be really cool.
What does it take to move forward from where we're at?
Yeah, that's a logical and good question. Yeah. I don't know. I think, did you post Micah maybe
Yeah,
what it
the
takes?
CNCF has documented basically the process to get to incubation. And I haven't looked at this before. I'm just looking at this for the first time. But that would be a great thing if someone wants to present next week. Kind of even just, if it probably doesn't involve a lot of work, but just reading through this and sort of translating it to everyone on the community. Even if you want to send do we have a community mailing list? I don't know if there's a Tink mailing list.
Yeah, we've got a Google group.
Yeah, if we want to post there and then sort of just do a mini report on just what does it take. I know the bullet points are pretty straightforward, but make it even easier for me and everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm willing to take that on. I'll work at that. One of the other cool things that I learned, I went to a session where I don't know what you call them, but they were employees of the CNCF and they were just fielding questions about whatever. And so I went in and asked a whole bunch of questions. And Marcus, I think you're already started down this, but they have resources for Zoom meetings. they also have, you guys might have known this, but I didn't know this. They have mailing lists. We can do public and private mailing lists. So we can set up security mailing lists, which I think is a big miss or something we're lacking at the moment. So people can email to a private group of individuals, any kind of security, a CVE type things they find. They also have, they have a whole bunch of other resources that we can take advantage of. Yeah. And then I found out that the CNCF has this idea of, and I think you've already pointed to it before, Marcus, where we give them a list of people we call maintainers. And that group of people, they said the word maintainers, they said, don't read too much into that, but that's basically, it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be somebody that has maintainer permissions in your project. It's just a list of people they're going to communicate with. So those are the points of contact between your project and the CNCF. So if you need people to submit tickets like you did, Marcus, like they said they had to be on that list in order to access like the different, they had some, I think it was Jira, no, Service Desk. I think they're using Service Desk, right? So, but anyways, so that list of people they call them maintainers, but that's just the point of context. And so I think we probably need to update that a little bit, but yeah, I had a really good session there. I talked to them and got a lot of good info about that. So.
Stealing all my points for when I was gonna go
Sorry.
into it.
Sorry.
On the note of just before we move forwards, on the note of KubeCon NA in October, several of us have talked about doing some sort of Tinkerbell talk there, or at least tendering a talk, which is kind of what you're getting at, Micah. And Marcus, your name came up as someone that would be interested in maybe participating, because I think your role may involve, that kind of, or complement that kind of thing. And we were talking through, like, it would be cool to have someone from Equinix and someone from Amazon maybe doing a talk, even if it was just a beginner talk. So do you want to think about that over the next week, about what we would want to target? Because we have no guaranteed talks right now.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in, I can find some other folks too who might be interested in doing that. You don't have to stop at one, right? And there's no guarantee that any one submission is going to make it in there. I don't think that, I don't think we're guaranteed anything as a sandbox project. But if we all submit things, then maybe there's a shot something gets in there, and try to spread the love between who wants to be involved in the actual talk. I went through a lot of this process with Crossplane, and it was fun because there was a year where Crossplane had a number of talks accepted, and then there was a year where we kind of took all of the advice of what to do and what not to do. We got like nothing. So it's really a crapshoot in terms of what's going to work, I think. But I think we're in a good spot with diverse vendorship behind us, or perhaps that can also be portrayed as vendor agnostic, hopefully.
I was told by somebody that used to be on the selection committee that the NA gets something like 5% of submissions get selected. So huge amounts get rejected. So, I've got fingers crossed, I guess. But so how do we want to proceed? Would we want to discuss this in the open or just in Slack? Like, should we create a discussion thread on the org repo, or what would be the best way to kind of brainstorm ideas and figure out who wants to participate?
CNCF Slack is probably good. I mean, it doesn't have to all be in the open. It's just conference talks.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Slack channel is good.
Cool.
Oh, one last thing I learned in that quick session, 1Password provides, if you can get their service for free as an open source project. So that would be just one of the other many things I think we should take advantage of as a group. Move all of our secrets. I don't even know how many we have, but move them all over to 1Password. And then, we could use the mailing lists that we create through the CNCF, for access to that and create some interesting granularity and whatnot there. So. Yeah, good point. Like, I think, the biggest one is probably like the key registry, right? Or Quay. That would be a nice one just because we had a recent troubles, right? With the hub repo, I think, and maybe, no, not Hook. I think basically the hub repo, right, was one of the challenges, like who has creds and whatnot. So, yeah.
Where are we going to store creds? Did you say? Sorry, did you touch on that?
Yeah. 1Password is I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a company. They provide you can get free access as an open source project.
Sorry. Okay. I missed that. Off with the fairies. Tinkerbell.
No problem. Yeah. So that's something that would be really awesome. I looked briefly into it, and you just like open a GitHub PR or something into like this 1Password repo, and you give them some info and like a mailing list or something, and then they give you some access. So, yeah. Micah, you posted, there's Zoom. The CNCF does have a Zoom, and if I'm not mistaken, we don't need to be incubating. We can get it right now. And
Well, awesome.
Marcus, if I'm not mistaken, that's the one you put in a request for, right? Was the Zoom stuff?
Yeah. So going back to things that Jacob was covering before, there's a service desk CNCF project. It's like an Atlassian project where you can make requests for things like this. So then you end up with like a ticket number. I have an open ticket for their calendar stuff, which is the mailing list. I created 2 requests, one for like a developer. There's a built-in one for, I'm trying to think what the level is, but there's a built-in one for high level. I think it's that maintainers group. And then there's another for users and developers that I've opened a issue for, saying, can we have one for, I think I might have called it community, and another one for developers, tracking to the 2 meetings that we currently hold weekly now, the triage one and this one. So with that, I also requested that there be Zoom access, and I'm still awaiting response from those. The last follow-up that I had was, that they were busy with KubeCon last week. So I expect we'll probably find out more later. The other one that I opened was about the Rufio project, looking for any sort of legal guidance they might be able to offer there. And similar, I don't have a response on that. There was another thing that I asked for in that channel. See, this is why they're going to regret giving me an account, which is infrastructure access. So, and going back to your 1Password, some of the things that are stored in the 1Password that I have access to now is like Tinkerbell credentials on like S3 buckets that Tinkerbell has been posting to in the past, like OC images. And that's the last thing that was really published there. But if we have needs for things like an S3 service, is that something that CNCF provides as like, here's Amazon S3 credentials, or that CNCF manages? Or is there a non-Amazon S3 object storage, S3 compatible object storage that they would provide credentials for and maintain the hardware potentially? So those are the questions that I've asked. I'm awaiting response on all of them.
I think from what I know about Kubernetes, like CNCF manages the accounts, Amazon accounts, and Amazon provides credits for those. And I'd be very surprised if we could not get Amazon funding for accounts or an account for Tinkerbell.
Yeah, and so it's also about not just like the credits, but just having this sort of central managed credential and ownership. Like, can we have the CNCF own it so that we're not tied to organizational boundaries?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because it was brought up in this meeting I went to about like infrastructure, and they brought up Equinix Metal, and they said Equinix Metal provides infrastructure to the CNCF. And then a follow-up question was asked about like, okay, how do you go about that? And they said, that you have to give them like an email or distribution list, and then the CNCF basically connects you with Equinix Metal and then hands it off. So I don't know if that's a similar model they would use for other types of things like, object storage. But they did say like, that's the model they use now, is where they just get you set up with the appropriate credits and whatnot. But then your access is just through your project. The CNCF doesn't manage or maintain that access in any way. So that's why they also recommended like get the mailing list from the CNCF, get that all set up too, so that you can manage that and you don't have to like Micah pointed, it looked like Micah found that Gianluca got Tinkerbell into 1Password, but he used his own email address. So like now, if I don't know how that's going to complicate us getting 1Password, do we have to like go to him to get the recovery, or can we like somehow change the mailing, the email? But
That might,
yeah,
that might be the one I
yeah.
have access to. So if that's the case, and we can maybe use that maintainers mailing list, or if we have like a security or maintainers list, assign it to that. So I'll see if I have access to that.
Is that just like a Google group main list? Like what
No,
is
this is the CNCF. This is the one that was created with that to get that Atlassian support, to get that service desk support.
Oh, okay.
There's like a Tinkerbell maintain. There's it I've been cataloging all of this in the open issue on the org repo.
Right.
But there is a CNCF URL that has a Tinkerbell maintainers calendar and mailing list address. I think this is new. I don't think this was there by default until the request started. But the idea is to get two more of these, one for one for community and one for developers.
Okay. Yeah, from what I'm seeing here, the 1Password for our open source that Gianluca had, it's not tied in any way to any of those that I can tell, at least in this PR, the one that Micah posted in the chat. So yeah, we'll have to see if we can figure that out somehow. Yeah. All right. Any other things there, Marcus, you want to bring up?
No, I think we're good there. Oh, yeah, so the channel where all this conversation is happening is in CNCF Slack in the CNCF infra channel, and Hippie Hacker is GitHub user HH is the person who responded that they might be able to figure out what that infrastructure S3 stuff looks like. In the process of looking for that, I also saw there is an AWS CNCF infra channel. So I don't know if that's related, but it's very, very quiet, but it started March 15th.
Okay. Do you have, Marcus, do you have the link by chance to the repo where we submit the maintainers for the CNCF?
Yeah, it's in that org issue that I had open, so we can find it there.
Org issue. Number 13, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, 13, and then it's linked from, the second to last thing on that page is a link from the.
Oh, I see it. Update maintainers.
Yeah, okay, so that one's not quite it, but I think that gets us one link closer. Calendar Zoom links. Date CNCF Foundation number 334.
Foundation. Project maintainers.csv. Okay. Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I mean, it does, I think it makes sense for us to revise that. I was trying to make the slightest incremental change I could to just get access.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into my topic I had about Tinkerbell admin role approvals. It seems like that group of CNCF maintainers, as they're called, should mirror what we're calling internally admin roles. Does that seem reasonable?
I think so, without comparing the notes, but yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable. Just on the face of it. Yeah.
Okay. So my item was, I threw out 2 weeks ago, we threw out the idea of adding admins. And at the moment we had 3 nominations, myself, Jeremy, and Marcus. I wanted to see, it didn't seem like there was any objection to it. And I want to see if we could get those pushed in right now. And then if they're not already there, and then we can just keep following up if anyone else wants to submit a nomination for another admin. Personally, I think since they are coming from the maintainers group, I think the more we have, the better, just because of the way the project is right now, like a lot of people's schedules don't have a lot of time to do stuff. So the more people we have available to do adminning things, I think would help us in general. But I would like to see if myself, Jeremy, and Marcus, if we could all be promoted to, I don't know what they call it in GitHub, admin or owner or something like that. Does that, anybody have any dissenting opinions on that?
Everybody that was nominated, or every maintainer?
Just the nominated ones for the moment.
Yeah. Yep.
Myself, Jeremy, and Marcus. But I mean, yeah, we can throw other names out. I just wanted to keep the ball rolling, especially, and since I've been volunteering to do a lot of the kind of org type things, and I do want to get access to CNCF, like that stuff you're doing, Marcus, so I can help out there as well. So that is my motivation, at least, to push this forward.
I mean, the short list works for me, and I'm not opposed to growing that list to make it match some other lists that we have. But probably, you know, conversation to continue when we compare notes and open up the issue. I guess before we start the issue, we should probably know who we're adding to it. It also means that we potentially be removing people from the existing list, right?
Yeah, that would be one of the first things I do want to get cleaned up. Is there's a bunch of teams in our org that need to be removed, and then there's a few elevated permissions that will also need to be removed. But yeah, like if this is okay to go, I can open an issue and then get us, myself, Jeremy, and you, Marcus, set up as admins, and then I would like to remove anybody else that's an admin. And we'll start removing those teams, have just like a single team called members. And then also, just for full transparency, what's on my list too is something that we're missing. While we added to each repo maintainers, they're added as, what are they called? Outside collaborators. And so that doesn't get you access, that doesn't make you a Tinkerbell org member. And so there are a lot of maintainers. We went through this with Chris actually, where they get maintainer access, but you can't like put their name on PRs, and because they're not a member of the org. They have like all the permissions and stuff, but like you can't do anything. And so there's a lot of people that were added that aren't members of the org yet. And that's one of the other things I wanted to get out, was just a whole bunch of invitations and make sure everybody's in the org that we already gave a specific role to.
Yeah, and you were looking to use automation for that, if I recall.
Manny and I started down that, but we haven't found anything good enough. I would prefer we have done it through like the GitHub org teams, but there wasn't, we couldn't find anything that would do it. That's why we actually went the outside collaborators route. But yeah, we haven't found a way. So personally, I was just going to do it manually the first time through. And if we can find a way to automate it, I think that's a great idea. But this has been like at least a month now where a lot of these folks, like I can't tag anybody as like some of the repos where approvers, they're already been given the role of approval. I can't add their name to a PR because they're not a member of the Tinkerbell org. And so that's one of the things I really want to solve like immediately. Because that will allow, you know, people at least get notified and get them maybe hopefully more involved in PRs and whatnot.
On the note of access and removals, did you mention, Jacob, the other week that there's some other access things maybe to do with maintainers? People would lose that soon, like inactive people or something, or is that under works? Is that underway, or you know, on a list somewhere to do?
Yeah, inactive members on the list. I don't think it's imminent. I think it'll happen maybe in the next month or so. We'll do kind of our first inactive sweep or whatever you want to call it. This first big change, I think, will just be to folks who have elevated permissions in terms of the GitHub org. Those are going to be removed. They'll be left as members of the org. They just won't have admin unless they are myself, Marcus, and Jeremy. And I think there might be one or two required CNCF people to have like admin or something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Do we want to add to the governance? Have we got anything in governance about admin roles?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So that's already spelled out, like kind of what it means and responsibilities. Okay, cool.
Yep. We could definitely add to the responsibilities now that I understand a little bit more about like CNCF interactions. I think we could add to it so that admins understand like they need to be proactive about interacting with that, and they take care of email lists and passwords and all of that kind of things, right? That I can add. But the general idea of admins is already there, yes.
And you mentioned it earlier, but I think mapping the admins list to the maintainers list seems reasonable. It looks like on the GitHub side that we have an admin that is CNCF. So the list might not match one-to-one. They don't need to be in the maintainers list to be admins. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I think, Marcus, do you have the current permissions to add folks as org admins? Should I just create an issue in the Tinkerbell/org and ping you in that, and then we go from there? Or what would you prefer? Any other different ways? Or
let's do it that way.
Okay.
Because there's folks in here that I'd need to evict that I should probably chat with first.
Okay, great. All right, that's all I had. I think we've got Chris. You have one about releases?
Yeah, I just do we have a written down like release process like that spells out the CI builds the thing and does, well, maybe the CI does everything. It does the tagging, it does everything, or maybe you have to manually create the tag. That kind of stuff, is that spelled out and consistent across project? Because Hegel, for example, I'm just using that to acquaint myself, and it'd be nice to go through the 0.7 release to just stamp that in time and work from there.
I believe Jason Titibris has been working to standardize that across all the repos. I posted in the Zoom chat. This is the standardization that we've started with, I think. He's created this little script called tag release. And if you, if I'm not mistaken, if you have like the right permissions, so like a maintainer, they could run this. I think at the moment it's locally. And then it would, maybe, let me double check the GitHub actions. There might actually be something in there for that. Yeah, there is a GitHub action. So maybe we just need to get with Jason to understand like what that flow is. It might just be creating a tag. And then once the V tag is created, maybe the CI kicks off.
Yeah, that'd be nice. and then yeah, it like auto populates any release artifacts and creates the release and whatnot in GitHub. That'd
Yeah,
be
that's
pretty sweet.
what I'm seeing in the GitHub action here. I'll post what I'm seeing in Boots. I'm pretty sure Jason went through most of the repos and got a bunch of this out. I think he did. I think it would be in regardless, if you wouldn't mind, Chris, pinging Jason. I think he was excited, at least initially, to get a lot of this done. He wanted to do a new sandbox release as well. But yeah, he definitely had better insight of what the idea was.
And what about go no go decisions? Like, I mean, I'm it's not. I don't think it's that important right now, because especially as we're on major version 0. But is there a discussion among maintainers, or is that kind of spelled out anywhere before you actually run the tagging process, I suppose?
I think Marcus had
Yeah,
brought up this in the past.
Yeah, and honestly, right now, I'm not sure if there was an answer, but the what comes to mind is in Terraform projects, there's a changelog file, and like merging that changelog file set you up to get that next version stamp in place. And there was like an external group who was clicking that, and they would only click it after you had updated the changelog. So I don't know that we have a system in place where we can say this is the PR that represents agreement that we're ready to release the next tag. I could be wrong about that. We don't have any projects that have like a version file in them. Everything is pulling that version externally, other than the sandbox project, which now has sort of switched roles. It will be receiving tags, not dictating tags. Yeah, it's. I don't have an answer to this. Like,
so I think in the immediate,
yeah.
in the short term, kind of make it up and be sensible, but like involving other maintainers. But we probably want to define something for like that 1.0 roadmap at some point.
Yeah, I'm looking at the GitHub actions that for Boots, at least. I think this is out to most repos. There is a generate release notes as part of this kind of workflow action, this GitHub action. So yeah, I don't know if that model of where you create the change log and then you PR it in, I don't know if that's what
Oh
we've
no, I'm not.
been
Yeah, I'm not
going
suggesting it would
for.
work. I'm just
Oh,
throwing
okay.
that the other places have a model where there's a way to open a PR, and that PR represents the tag. And so once the PR gets the right actions on it, the right thumbs, the right requirements, and it's merged, that triggers it. So I was just thinking out loud if there was a way that we could take advantage of that model where PRs drive releases. I don't know if that matches other CNCF projects. Like how would they release something as opposed, would it be this merge, or is somebody sending up a tag or using GitHub features to trigger a tag?
Right. Yeah, that's fair. So here's my very personal opinion about it. I would say, Chris, as a maintainer of Hegel, just go and do something, right? And if it ends up being like it's not the right way, then let's fix it. But I would err on the side of action here instead of waiting until there's some kind of, I don't know, somebody does more investigation and we get some kind of formal process, because I think we've done that in the past and it just ends up sitting around and nothing happening. So again, this is just me. Please feel free to disagree, but I'd say just, if you want to release Eagle because you're a maintainer, just like, I don't know, just go do it. And then we'll deal with the consequences afterwards.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think Tinkerbell across the board, I think every service could do with a release, because we've now introduced the Kube backend to everything. So it'd be great to just stamp that in history. Okay, this is more or less done. That's where my mind was going with this, and I think it's a good idea to take action, figure out what works, what doesn't work, and come up with a process through trial and error, and then we can rally around what knowledge we gain and reflect on other CNCF projects and commit to something for that V1 at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, if I'm not mistaken, didn't we have this conversation, Marcus, already, where we wanted to fall, like, at a minimum, we don't want to do versions earlier than what Sandbox has currently released? Is that what we had talked about? Basically, like, we don't
No,
want to
that
do
we
like,
can get ahead of Sandbox.
right, but we don't want to
Right.
go behind Sandbox is what I'm saying, right? So like
Um,
Hegel, for example, we wouldn't want to tag it V0.0.1, right? We would want to do
Oh no,
at
we're
a
already
minimum,
up
like,
to date. Sure, we're already right now. Everything matches Sandbox. So Hegel already has an 060. And so while
oh,
we're in
okay, perfect.
Semver zero land, there's no commitment to breaking changes or concern about breaking changes. So I'm remembering more of that conversation. My philosophy on that is like, the whole early release often in terms of tags. So we can get an 070, an 80, 90, whatever. We can have a new release every day if that's the cadence of change that we wanted to introduce. So general thoughts then based on that and what Chris was saying. In the code owners, there's 3 listed folks in the code owners file. So maybe if there's a majority, I don't know, just democratically between the 3 people. Maybe we don't have 3 people across the board, so maybe 50% is good enough to decide. And then there's also a releasing MD, which looks like Jason contributed there. So any thoughts that you have, Chris, on improving that releasing MD will help pave the path for the next release. If we can update that file with any of the changes procedurally or whatever.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't even see that. It looks pretty straightforward. Create the annotated tag. Push the tag to the GitHub repository, and then that triggers a GitHub action. Review the release on GitHub. Seems pretty straightforward there. Cool. Yeah, that answered my question. I forgot we had already tagged all the repos, so we don't have to worry about, an earlier tag. So I do like that. Just, yeah, the democratic vote between maintainers is a good idea. Just make sure all the maintainers are on board, or a majority or whatever. Yeah.
And you can take advantage of when everybody's got COVID, you're the only acting member, just boom, push the button.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to
Cool.
stop making fun of COVID. It's no good.
Any other thoughts around that? Last one, Chris, or anyone else?
No, nothing.
Okay, awesome. Don't have any other topics in the agenda. Anybody have any ad hoc ones they want to bring up? Okay. Looking at the items for discussion inside of triage party. And we've got, what, 10 minutes here. It looks like there are a few items in there.
Sorry, one thing. I'm just going to
Yeah.
throw out Hegel. We established is not EC2 metadata compliant, and I think, irrespective of some of the other discussions about toggling on different APIs and whatnot in Hegel and coming up with a Hegel metadata standard that we could contribute to, like the cloud init process. Outside of all of that, we probably want to contribute an EC2 thing, because there's some use cases we have in provisioning today in EKS Anywhere that could definitely use that. So yeah, just call out, watch this space for that. And I'll probably look to make clear that the existing metadata is very much Equinix, and maybe put that in its own package or something. So it's just very, very clear what's going on there.
Do you think there's conflicts, or do you think it's just that more versions need to be defined? So like the 2009 0404 is there now, and there's definitely newer versions that we could add in. Is that what you're looking to do? Add new versions or make breaking changes on the 2009 0404 support?
No, so the intent would be, so the reason we want to be able to toggle APIs on and off is for that reason. So you can say, I want to use the Equinix metadata standard, and it just works. And the code will recognize that if you try to toggle on two, because you might want I know Equinix uses the gRPC API as well as the HTTP APIs. So if you toggled on two, it will expose that, provided there are no conflicts. That's what I'm thinking. And in the case of Equinix and EC2, there would be a conflict, so the service would just error out and say there's a conflicting endpoints. Does that sound sane?
Yeah, like also just improvements to the 2009 0404 that's already in the project. I've been open to that for a while. I tried to make some changes myself in the past because I noticed among the many things that we've both pointed out in different issues, that path traversal isn't quite right. It looks like on AWS, you get a trailing slash on the end of directory listings, and the existing Hegel stuff doesn't return that trailing slash. That changes the behavior of tools like Cloud Init when they're doing their recursive tree search and they're putting stuff into the metadata that's accessible to Cloud Init scripts. So you can't, the way that in a Cloud Init script, the way that you would like inject SSH keys, instead of it being treated like an array, is treated like a giant string. And it works, but it's like kind of surprising that it does. And there are other endpoints where when Cloud Init tries to, it just doesn't know that something is a directory. And so it doesn't include that entry into the metadata that you can use, that in a Cloud Init script you could introduce through Jinja. So there's a lot of cool use cases that I'd like to see made available, which would be inherited through Hegel updates.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to see is the first step, I think, is to maybe consider removing some of the JQ stuff and actually formalizing the relationship between the data source and the construct that it's providing to inspect, to kind of clear up some of the ambiguity around that, because it is structured, but the structure is not defined. It's only defined in these JQ strings. And then once I feel like if we have clarity there, then we'll be able to work towards more intentional behaviors like what you're describing, like use a trailing slash, because Cloud Init uses that. It's not necessarily required, but I think it would be a nice stepping stone to making it a lot more understandable, if that makes sense. Unless, of course, but
no, I tried
disagree.
I tried to find the spec. I tried to find some Amazon spec on this is what our metadata format is, and directories will end with slash, and I couldn't find it. I think so. Cloud Init is just an example of a tool that keys off of that slash, and it's not being returned in this case.
I saw your comment on that. It was really weird. I don't know why Cloud Init did that, but it's what it is.
Cool. Any other topics? That one of the flags to toggle APIs in Hegel, that was one of the items for discussion in Triage Party.
Default workflows keeps coming up and keeps getting kicked back. I don't know if there's been any effort on that, any interest among your team. Yeah.
I think we may have at one point talked about it, Jacob. I don't know if you were with us at that point. But I think we're handling things slightly differently. So yeah, because it involves like CAPT and whatnot, and that is our default workflow, if that makes sense. We kind of already have that concept for particular machine types within the context of EKSA. So yeah, I don't think we have it anymore. That is the whole, you know, if you submit a piece of hardware and there is no associated workflow, then when the hardware pops up, it would receive a default workflow to run. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, there were different thoughts on how to go about that, and I threw in there just like the thought of, well, why don't we just use pattern matching when we're matching on Mac, and then a default workflow could be anything that matches the pattern of a Mac. So you could use that for hardware prefix things. So you could say all Dells have this Mac prefix, so we can do smart things like that, or we could use a regex that's maybe like a list of things in regex format, or we could just say this is the .star pattern. So that's just an example of how we could use pattern matching rather than equality comparisons to say that this is the workflow that needs to run when I find this MAC address.
Yeah, there's been a couple other folks mentioning things too. The one I like is actually something that we just started doing in CAPI, in CAPT. We've added labels to things so that CAPT can look at different pieces of hardware based on labels and then operate appropriately on it. I think that model would be nice too, because then because you got to put hardware record in no matter what, right? We're not going to pixie boot you, net boot you unless you have a hardware record. And so when you put your hardware record in, why not just throw in a label? And then if we had workflows that could be label based, then it's similar to this idea of like a regex matching as well, right? But now you're just looking at labels and you're just like, okay, if I have this label, this is the workflow I want. And then I think we negate this idea of like a default workflow. Like we just have more sophisticated ways to call workflows, right? We don't have a default one. We just have the ability to call one workflow hits lots of machines. But then that opens up like lots of interesting ideas around like, well, how do you track all these? Do they create new workflows every time a new one starts up? But yeah, so personally, I think it's a good idea, but I think there's still a lot of investigation and work. And I think we just need somebody to step up and say, yep, I'm going to go try and get this idea to work or something.
Yeah, auto discovery or auto registry was also mixed in with that. And that's where the wildcard .star also comes in. The idea being if the network could be wide open, new machines joining the network could just be self-enrolled into Tinkerbell. So Tinkerbell wouldn't take on that role. It would say, I don't know who you are, but you match my wild pattern that I'm open to. So here, go run this workflow. And that workflow would happen, that default workflow in that case could start with a container that does registry against the Tinkerbell API. So your default workflow is a registry workflow. Add you in as a hardware. That was the thinking at the time, anyway.
If we did that, wouldn't Boots need a CIDR block and proper leasing management? Because there is no, if you're self-enrolling, then it needs to be able to select an IP from a pool because there's no one-to-one mapping, and then it would have to track that as well in some capacity. Maybe not leasing, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you would have to have leasing, right? You'd have to have some, like you said, some pool that you could hand out IPs to. Otherwise, how are you net booting, right? You can't.
Yeah.
That's a significant change. Not that I'm not saying we don't do it. I'm just saying, but that's significant. And somebody needs to make that known. Like, what does that look like? And what are the effects? Like that to me is worthy of like a proposal to say, look, this is what's going to go on, because that's a big change to Boots. Right now, it's very clearly known we only do DHCP host reservations. And I think one of the things that I do at least, we can just spat out right out the gate is we can say like, yeah, you can run this in an environment with another DHCP server because we only respond if we know about the hardware, right? And so once we introduce this new thing, now that's all out the door. Well, now we are a general purpose, more or less, we're a general purpose DHCP server. Can't really run it with another DHCP server running, right? That creates some interesting caveats there. So
Keep it optional. Wildcard. You don't need the wildcard. You don't need the default registry thing. You could say only match the
Sure.
Dells, only match the. Yeah, this is fun.
Sure.
It should happen else right now.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I've got to jump into another thing too. So.
Oh yeah, we've gone over. Yeah, this is good. So if somebody's watching this in the future and you're interested in this, please do chime in the Slack channel. But thanks everybody for showing up. Next Tuesday, same time, will be triage party, and have a great week. Take care, y'all.